say. Hello, I'm Lynnaire Johnston. I'm the word wizard, and I'm the author of LinkAbility for powerful strategies to maximize your LinkedIn success. Today, I'm talking with top US trainer JoAnne Funch. And thanks to the modern wonders of Zoom, I'm in the South Island of New Zealand and JoAnne is in America. Whereabouts in America are you, JoAnne? Please remind me, I do keep forgetting.
I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, center of the country.
Center of the country, and hopefully well away from all the wildfires that are going on at present.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, JoAnne, you've just received a copy of my book and you've kindly agreed to have a chat to me. Here we are, we're twins. Have a chat to me about the 4 strategies. And the strategies we're going to be talking about today are connecting, publishing or posting, engaging, and direct messaging. Now, one of the most important things I think about LinkedIn is your ability to connect with anybody, anywhere. And you and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and you and I met because you sent me a video invitation message. Do you remember doing that?
I do. I actually think you invited me to connect and I responded to you with a video message.
And we have been friends ever since. And
yes.
2 or 3 times a year, we get on the phone or on Zoom and we have a good old natter about LinkedIn and the various aspects of it. Now, JoAnne and I are very much on the same page when it comes to beliefs and values. But I wanted to ask her some questions about the various aspects of my book today, because she sees things in a slightly different way from I do, even though our values and beliefs are the same. And so I wanted to start by asking you about connecting. JoAnne, tell me how you decide who you are going to connect with on LinkedIn.
Well, a couple of ways. First of all, if I'm sending the connection request, then I'm pretty strategic on who I invite to my network. And I do that by inviting people who I know could either benefit from my services or could be a good referral partner for me, or someone that has a fairly large network and could invariably spread my message further. Now, if somebody invites me and I get many invitations every single week, I look at their profile, I decide if they're a good fit for my network. But with that said, I accept a lot of those people after I send them a message and ask them why they wanted to connect with me, if in fact they didn't send me a personal invitation. And so based on their response, I will either accept or ignore their invitation at that time.
So you send a message first before you decide whether to accept or decline. That's really interesting. Now tell me, of those messages that you send, how many people respond to those? What kind of percentage?
So that is really interesting to me because, first of all, they invited me. And so one of 2 things happens when I send that message, and typically my response is, most of them didn't send a personal invitation. So I will say, what did you have in mind when you invited me to connect? I appreciate the connection, but what did you have in mind? And one of 2 things always happens. Either they never respond to me, so I just ignore their invitation, or then they come back and they say, well, here's why I wanted to connect with you. And then they tell me, and then based on what they said to me, I will decide at that point if they're a good fit for my network or not.
And have you sometimes already decided that you probably think they're not, but want to give them the benefit of the doubt and send them the message?
Yes. And the reason I do that is just because of the nature of being a LinkedIn trainer, right? I mean, you probably do the same thing. I mean, this is what we teach people how to do. And so I look at it oftentimes as being a teaching moment for people that aren't as savvy of a user. They could benefit from my asking that question, and hopefully they catch on to why I'm doing that.
Which I think is an excellent idea. I have started to recently be sending people some links once I have established whether they are interested in receiving them. So they've invited me or I've invited them to connect. We've connected, and my next message is, you probably know that I'm a fan of LinkedIn. I have some resources available. Would you like me to send you those links? Now, sometimes people will say yes, and sometimes I hear absolutely nothing. And that pretty much tells me that they are not going to really be a huge asset to my network, because they're not engaging with me for a start, and particularly if they've invited me to connect.
Yes. In fact, let me just share a really quick story. About a year or so ago, I ran my own test, and I sent out, I contacted 50 people. I reconnected with 50 people in my network, and all 50 of those people invited me to connect. It wasn't the other way around. And I reconnected with a personal message, and the results were fascinating, because out of that 50, I got 7 responses.
Oh, ouch.
And out of those 7 responses, 3 of those people immediately pitched me on something. And so it's interesting. This is what's happening out there. And so, there's no value in a network you're not willing to build. You have to engage with people.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what LinkedIn is all about. And that's one of the reasons why I included in my book a strategy about direct messaging. Yeah. And even though it's not right next to connecting in the book, we'll talk about that now because we've just brought that up. But I think direct messaging is really important and has some excellent advantages over email, because most people still are managing their own LinkedIn accounts. And so if you send them a message, they are more likely to see it. And I also recall reading a statistic, I think that you published, JoAnne, where you said that LinkedIn had quoted a huge increase in the number of direct messages being sent during lockdown and during the pandemic this year. Was that right?
Yes, yes, and that was reported by LinkedIn, and they said over 50% of members, meaning people who are already connected, messages were up 50%.
Which is really interesting, because I think that if you message somebody well, then you can develop a conversation. That's, after all, what happened with us, right? And it's happened for me with numerous other people. You begin a conversation. Now, tell me, though, what are the things that really annoy you when somebody direct messages you? What do you hate the most?
I think it's when somebody wants to pitch a service to me, suggesting that I need it, and yet they don't even know me.
Yes, yes. I would go further and say almost any kind of pitching, particularly if it's very early in the conversation. And as you say, you've established no relationship, no rapport. They've not asked you any questions about whether or not you are in the market for their product or service. And to me, I often find that there is a certain group or a certain industry where they do that immediately you connect with them. So under no circumstances do I anymore ever accept anybody who is in that industry group. And that's a real shame to have an entire industry tarred with the same brush, but it happens time and time again. So I want to know a little bit about the kind of direct messages that you send to people. How are you using the direct messaging feed at the moment, and how has that changed during this year, 2020?
Well, you know, I think it's been a perfect opportunity during lockdown to reconnect the network you already have. You know, we're so inclined to keep getting new members, but what about the people that are already in your network? I mean, hopefully at some point you connected with them for a reason. Maybe it's someone you met at a conference that was impactful to you at the time. So it's important to reconnect with those people. And statistics have proven that you'll get better outcomes with people that already know you than people who don't know you. So, you know, I, on a consistent basis, reach out to people in my network. I just go back and, you know, either someone catches my eye in the news feed, or I go back and I scroll through my connections and I say, oh gosh, I haven't heard from Jim in a long time. I'm going to send him a quick message. You know, the impact of that has been phenomenal. I just come from that place of really caring about people and showing interest. So, you know, I'd say, how has you and your family been doing over the past few months? It isn't a long message, it doesn't have to be a long message, but it's just letting people know that they're seen and they're heard. And I think ultimately that's, as human beings, that's all we all want.
Yes, we want to feel included and thought about and remembered. And I agree with you. People always seem to be astonished when I personally respond to a message that they send me. It's like they think that in actual fact it's all going to be automated, which for the record, I am so totally against with LinkedIn. And they don't expect to hear from a real person in terms of a response to their message. And I particularly I like to do that in a timely fashion when people ask me a question, because I think that that's really important. If somebody's in the middle of something and they want to know about something, they want to know about it as quickly as you can. But I do tend to find that means I spend an awful lot more time on LinkedIn than perhaps I should. JoAnne, are you the same? Does it kind of suck you in too?
It can. But for me, it's in a good way.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, so if somebody's responded to my message and then they've asked me something back, I want to respond to them. And so I've found actually reconnecting with people over the last 5 months has been really gratifying. With absolutely no expectations. And I have counseled my own clients to just go do it and see what happens.
Well, you know what? I think I'm going to do the same as well, because I think that there, in New Zealand anyway, we still have the virus around, and I know that you do in the States, and it's still very difficult for you. And so people are still spending a lot more time on their computers than they might otherwise do. And so there's that kind of connection, there's that reason to reach out to people, if you like. So, excuse me. So I think that now's a very good time to be doing that. And it seems to be, and it's genuine, not only seems, it is actually genuine. I think that's the other thing about messaging, JoAnne. It has to be authentic. It has to be from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think, you know, it's so interesting to me because I run my business from a place of service, and that doesn't mean I have to make every interaction transactional. it's not that way for me at all. I mean, I've built an entire business out of really just trying to be helpful and showing up, and I give a lot of free content. And so, and I'm not against a sales message, so don't get me wrong on that. I'm not against asking for what you want, but I think it's what we said at the beginning, you've got to build some rapport, some know, like, and trust factor.
Yes. And credibility.
Yeah.
And I think that all feeds into the know, like, and trust. JoAnne, you mentioned content. And I'm a great content writer. I'm always putting things out on LinkedIn. And I rather suspect that you're the same, because your posts tend to pop up in my feed from time to time, and we do get to see each other's content. What's your favorite posting format? What do you enjoy putting out the most that gets you the best results? And however you decide to measure that, because for you that may not be viewership.
Yeah, you know, I have to, first of all, I just want to let everybody know that you are way more skilled at content than I am, by a mile. Your content is really amazing. You, just in terms of interesting, you make a lot of interesting posts, you challenge people to think. I guess that's why you're a writer.
Yeah, probably. I think it might be the other way around, actually. The writer came first, and I can't help myself.
So you have, I think you have a real skill, and people should be following your content, because I even get ideas from reading your content on structure and whatever. But to answer your question, I think for me, my favorite content is just the content that when I can post about somebody else or somebody else's event, or I can help someone else. And then it's interesting how people will engage with that, because it's non-threatening, it's hopefully interesting. And I think people appreciate when you share other people's content. So that's probably my favorite.
Well, that's something I do a little bit of, but not as much as I should. And I mentioned in my book 2 people, both of them in America, who do that on a regular basis. They are constantly sharing. Well, they came to my attention because they shared my post, but not just shared it, they made a comment about it, and so that it reached a much wider audience. And that's one of the things I love about LinkedIn, is that giving, sharing aspect. And so I'm interested to hear you describe your business as coming from one of service, because I hadn't considered it in those terms, but I think that's probably how I see it as well. And I think that if you have a giving, sharing mindset, that you are going to be much more successful on LinkedIn, because you do come across as authentic and real and genuinely wanting to help people. And people are not always on LinkedIn to be bought or sold to. People want to learn.
Exactly. And, you know, I think sometimes people miss really simple opportunities. And what I mean by that is, you know, one of the habits I got into early on was I click on the home page every morning and I scan it, right?
Yeah.
And I think because I've done it so long, I just have this knack, like when people ask questions, I see that. And if I can help someone by answering questions, doesn't even have to be what I know anything about. It doesn't have to be about LinkedIn. If somebody said, do you know a web developer, I can answer that. And so what happens is you just can build your credibility around being a helpful person. People recognize that. And so I think the more you can just comment and help other people in whatever it applies to, you become known for that. And I think there's so much value in just lending a hand up to other people. I mean, isn't that what networking is?
It absolutely is. And you're talking about helping people through comments and providing referrals is exactly the kind of thing I mean when I talk about engaging in the in my book, where you are engaging on people's content. So that might be a like, a comment, or a share of somebody's post or article. And I find that that nets me an awful lot of really interesting new people to connect with. Don't you think? It's amazing.
Yes. I've had the same thing happen where I will just comment on some random article that I happen to find interesting. Had nothing to do with my business, nothing to do, except that it was interesting. And and then people start to engage with you. I love that.
I do too. And often I'll find that somebody will engage or make a comment on one of my posts. So then I will go and engage on a couple of theirs. And so there's that reciprocity going on, which I think is really nice. And then that tends to widen your network, but also your relationships. And I was talking yesterday to a gentleman who lives in Auckland in New Zealand, who I had seen commenting on a post of somebody in the United States, which I then commented on because I liked the topic. Then throughout the day yesterday, he and I talked on LinkedIn through direct messaging on just, you know, some random bits and pieces to do with how we were each finding what was going on this year. Then he showed up on my webinar yesterday afternoon, and at the end of the day, he recommended some really good Netflix documentaries for me that I hadn't seen because we'd established a connection over climate change. And you see, I just really felt that that was a really nice, refreshing relationship to have with somebody who I will probably never meet or even have the opportunity to do business with. And that's not really the issue. The issue is that we have built a relationship over some common ground through simply serendipity, if you like. His just making a comment that happened to show up in my newsfeed that I was then able to engage on, and he spotted. And I think it's those kind of relationship opportunities, JoAnne, that LinkedIn provides that, I don't know about you, but that is what gives me the real buzz. That's what gets me on the newsfeed in the mornings. Or what's happened today? What can I learn from someone else, and what are they sharing that I really want to know about and need to know about? So it's those opportunities, I think, but the engagement part of LinkedIn, I think, is so essential.
Yeah, I do too. You know, if you're just going to sit back and be a lurker, there's no value in that, right? And like you said at the very beginning of our conversation, you said, you know, this is such a global network. If you just took the time to get to know people from around the world and didn't look at it as transactional and just took the time to get to know people, wouldn't the world just be a better place?
Wouldn't the world?
I mean, we all look at the troubles. I mean, we've got plenty of them here in the US this year. And, you know, if we just took the time to learn about other people in different places.
Yes, and we have lots of trouble in our own countries, there is no doubt. But we are fortunate to live in first world countries, JoAnne, you and I.
Yeah, we are.
And we have a lot of advantages, typified by the fact that here are you and I spending time on our laptops, on a Zoom call with each other on the other side of the world. And so I think that it is something that we're very fortunate to have, and I'm always incredibly grateful for the accident of my life that I'm able to be in this position and to be able to be talking to you.
Oh, you know, really, we've had such great conversations over the years about everything, about gardening to everything, and
we have,
and I so appreciate it.
Well, I really love it too, and I'm so pleased to have been able to include you in my book, because you certainly deserve to have a mention for some of the fabulous information that you have shared with me over time, because like everybody when they started out on LinkedIn, I've been a newbie, but I always consider myself somebody who wants to learn and find out more things about the platform, and because it's constantly changing, there's always something new to talk about. So I want to finish on one final question, JoAnne, and that is, out of the whole of 2020, with all of the new and different features that LinkedIn has given to us, and taken a few away, of course, but of all the new features this year, what do you think is the standout one that you like the most and you think is providing the most value for people?
Well, I think it's actually the featured section.
Oh, you see, we are so on the same page. It was my answer too.
because even if you're not a really savvy user, there's so much value in having those big billboard size images at the top of your profile. So I think for people to leverage that visual space, because even LinkedIn's become a visual medium, that I think it's powerful. So that would be my favorite. Agree. How about you?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's my thing too. And lots of things I like about it, that you can add videos and still images. I've added a GIF to mine, so that, and that's a trick I learned from Corey Warfield. And so having a GIF which is moving on your featured section is quite, it sort of stops people, it grabs the eye. But it is unfortunately of a cat. And so I'm not really quite sure about the relevance of a moving cat to LinkedIn, except I've used it in the terms of boring content. So you see the cat dropping its head because it's bored. But I like the fact that you can do things like that on LinkedIn now, whereas before the little thumbnails were so tiny that you couldn't even see them. So, and I found too that the way I am doing profile updates for people this year, and my own, have changed as well, and I'm putting a lot more visual material into profiles, because I think that really makes them compelling and grabs your attention. So I've seen a couple of the profiles that you've written for other people, and they seem to have a little more of the visual element in terms of emojis and lists as well. So I think definitely that it's heading more into the visual end of it. But one last question: have you got stories yet?
I do not.
No, we don't in New Zealand yet either. They have them in Australia and I believe in the UK, but I'm still to be convinced that that's going to be terribly helpful, because I understand they will disappear after 24 hours.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm really in favor of it either. I mean, I understand the value in video. I think it's a powerful medium, but I'm not so sure people on LinkedIn are ready for that. I think they might get some pushback on that. What do you think? I
think so too, because it seems to me that it's less business oriented. And more Instagram flavored, if you like. And so I really can't see the relevance of it in terms of the effort that you would have to put in to get a good quality video that's only going to last for 20 seconds and is gone in 24 hours. I'm really not sure that that's going to be terribly helpful in building credibility. Certainly build visibility, but credibility I'm yet to be convinced of. But I guess when it arrives, we'll be able to experiment and find out.
You know, that's a really good point you just made. Really a good point, because if you're gonna, it takes time, and if you're gonna produce that kind of content and it's not adding to your credibility, I mean, everyone has to evaluate, is that a good use of my time?
Yes, yes. And I would contend that with LinkedIn, it's probably not going to be a good use of your time, unless you
Yeah.
can repurpose the content somewhere else. And maybe that's the general idea, because I'm a big believer in repurposing content, particularly if you write articles on LinkedIn. I really do think there's an opportunity there to be able to use the material in different sorts of ways. And I was listening to a podcast recently where the person has a business repurposing content, not just for LinkedIn, but for all kinds of social media and different marketing aspects. And I try to do that too. I need to get better at it, because I have so many different and new ideas whizzing around in my head. I don't even have time to get all those down on paper. So repurposing content that I've already done doesn't quite get a look in.
So when you talk about posting in your book, I mean, you talk about different types of posts, but you can repurpose your content within those various types of posts. So what do you find that's been an effective piece of content?
Doing that, I really think that it's a good idea. I don't do this as much as I should, but I think it's a good idea to turn any written post that lends itself to it into a video post. I think that's a really good way to do it. But the thing that I actually do is, when I write an article, I write it in sections, so that it might have an introduction, 4 sections, and then a conclusion or summary at the end. And each of those 4 sections can be taken out, and then they can be turned into individual posts, just as text posts. And then if I'm lucky and I've used the article as the basis of a webinar, then I'll take the slides from the webinar and just tidy those up so they're into a little standalone format, if you like. And then I'll post that as a document post, because document posts seem to me to get very good traction, because I'm not sure whether the algorithm is still giving them a helping hand, or whether people just like them and so they get more views. But the numbers for document posts are really good compared to, say, for example, with image posts, which I find get very poor viewer numbers for the kind of thing. So that's what I do. And then, of course, I also use that same content on my website. So everything is repurposed. The thing that I don't do regularly in there that I've just mentioned is getting in front of a camera. It's not my natural place. So it's a bit of a barrier for me. So do you repurpose much of your content? Because I get your emails and I see you on Facebook Live, and I know that you do video too. You have a YouTube channel, don't you?
I do, but listen, I go in spurts too. I have the same challenge as everybody else in terms of getting all the things done I want to get done. And so, I could do a better job myself in repurposing my own content. But so, I have a LinkedIn company page, and I will post my blog posts and events on my company page. I've been working on building my followers of my company page. It just gives me another place to share my brand. Yes. And so I mix it up between these places. I oftentimes will repurpose a blog post into an article on LinkedIn, and I think articles aren't doing as well as they used to, but I don't necessarily look at it as a metric as much as I look at it as putting current content that's housed on my profile. So for those people who do want to check me out, they can go to my profile and see those articles. So I really look at it long term as part of my adding to my credibility. I'm less about the immediate gratification of the metric.
I agree, and I think the articles have a long tail, because I'm often surprised by people coming to me and saying, I read an article that you wrote on LinkedIn in 2018, and I'm going, yes, I can't even remember what I wrote last month, let alone 2018. And I think that's because Google indexes articles. So there are people, you're right, who say that they aren't any value, but I really disagree. But that might be because I'm a writer. But I do believe there is a place for articles, and I think they build up into a library of really good, solid work.
Yes. And what you just said now, people should be paying attention to, because with the Google indexing of your articles, I mean, that lasts forever. And there's real value in that piece of what you just said. So, and that's why I do it too. That's why I say, to me, it's less about the metrics. It's more about the longevity of my brand and the content of my brand.
Absolutely. So I would like to wrap this up and leave it there with you, JoAnne, telling us a bit about your brand and how people can find you, whether they should follow you on LinkedIn or send you an invitation to connect. How would you like people to follow up, having heard our conversation today?
Well, they're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have never run across another JoAnne Funch, but you could certainly put my name in the search bar in the US, and I'm sure that you'll find me for sure. So mention that you watched the interview between Lynnaire and I. That would be great. That would be a great way to connect with me. And all of my contact information is in my LinkedIn profile. So
I'm just going to add one thing about your LinkedIn profile, which was a really good example of using LinkedIn in a creative way. Instead of putting in your address, you listed some of your services. Now, I am here to tell you that I copied that idea, and as soon as I spotted it, I did exactly the same in mine. And that's such a, nobody needs to know your address, but they do need to know your services. What an innovative idea that was, JoAnne. I really like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to use the space in a LinkedIn profile. You just have to be creative. I chatted with a fellow today who had no contact information in his profile.
I often come across that too, and more than one profile. We need to have another conversation about profiles, JoAnne.
Yes.
So let's make sure that we do that. So, but for now, thank you so much for joining me. It's the end of your day, the beginning of mine, and I really appreciate the fact that you, were kind enough to buy
I love your book, and I'm really going to get it out there for you, because your tips are so important. And I love your writing style also, because your writing style is simple, and your formatting is so easy to follow. I mean, this is like a guide to me, a guidebook. So good work, my friend.
Thank you so very much indeed, JoAnne. And I'm just been thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you today. And let's make sure that we do it again soon.